Hey guys, so lately I've been playing the gem of a game mode that is Currency Wars and just recently hit Wealth Creator 20, as well as completed all the bonds by farming Amethyst Gold 1 stages. While I've been playing though, I've noticed a couple of issues that have bugged me, like the inability to check during a Currency Wars run which bonds I have remaining for the Jabes, having absolutely no way of finding out the full list of Cyrene shot buffs, which is an absolute disappointment for a gambling man like myself, and being unable to see how exactly characters scale a star level, meaning that I've had to turn to the English translations of Namu Wiki since the official wiki has no info on Currency Wars kits yet. But that's not what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about the worst trial builds and seeing how the heck Hoyo nerfs certain characters' kneecaps beyond repair. Couple of guidelines before we get into some tier list slop though. First, I'll be judging how good or bad a trial build is based on E0 S0 performance. This means no signatures or eidolons, but if a better free-to-play Lycone exists, I will mark down a build for that. Second, I can't actually view all the trial units' relics since I own some of them, so for those units I'll be assuming that they use the build target relics recommended in-game, which may not always be accurate, but it's the best I've got for now. If it's different from my actual guesses, please let me know in the comments. Third, I will only be judging on-field limited 5-star units, so no 4-star units, and no freebies like Danheng PT and Archer either. Off-field units builds typically don't matter as much, and 4-star and free 5-stars are pretty easy to slot in relics as you wish. And finally, keep in mind that a max advantage layout, which you can just get by playing the game, does give you 18% free crit rate and 36% defense, among other buffs. So trial build crit ratios aren't actually as bad as you might think. Unfortunately, they aren't enough to save all of the units on this list, especially as you ascend the ranks. With those guidelines explained, let's start with the bottom tier of trial units that come pretty much ideal out of the gate. As you'd expect, the list is pretty small, with Tribbie and the Herta being the only true contenders in my opinion. Technically, early game Tribbie does best in the frontline at E1S1, or maybe even slotting in DDD, but relics-wise, she's pretty much ideal at E0S0 as a sub or main DPS with Poet or Bone. Her off-turn follow-ups and energy mean she doesn't need to spam action advance to take lots of actions, which is especially true when she's off-field and always follows up once every 2 ults, regardless of investment. Regarding the Herta, she regens fixed energy based off her teammates' actions, with her ult giving her an immediate turn, so all she needs to do is maximize her damage. As such, her recommended set of Scholar and Izumo, which she gets in her trial version, is ideal. Moving one tier up, we basically have the Herta but for nihilities. Acheron, however, lacks any action advance on her ult, making her a great Eagle abuser with how frequently she spams them, but it isn't all too necessary to give her those extra turns if you absolutely can't. And outside of Eagle, Pioneer and Izumo is her best in slot set, so that's cool. Castorice is up next, and she's the only character on this list to have a Battle Pass Lycone as her S1, which certainly says a lot about her free-to-play options. That aside, though, or even because of that, her build is really good, even hitting 100 crit rate in battle, so realistically the only way you're seeing a real improvement from the trial Castorice is either going Eagle or securing her S1 or her Eidolons. Even the Quantum Orb doesn't matter as much due to how much HP you can stack in Currency Wars. As for Finon, the slow startup from not running Vonwacq sucks, but he has plenty of action advancers in his ideal teams and ways to cheat out his ults early, so he's fine on that front. Additionally, with his ult turns based on his base speed, there's actually no way this time to significantly make him better unless he has his S1 or Eidolons. Does running a solo on-field DPS with only a set number of actions suck so much in Currency Wars that he's forced to become the equivalent of a spiky hedgehog? Yes, but that's not a trial build issue, that's just a Finon issue. Dill gets to consume infinite SP per turn and doesn't really have good relics anyways, so with his trial build having a decent enough speed and crit ratio, it doesn't hinder him too much, since his game plan revolves around spamming SP, not spamming turns, which more relics wouldn't help with. Still, an ERR rope to spam more ults would be ever so slightly more ideal. Okay, I might as well cover Aglaea as a formality. Since Hoyo did the most important thing right in giving her an ERR rope, the rest of her game plan and gaining turbo speed via propeller double boots is kinda just solved for her. With Eagle being useless due to her taking an immediate turn when she ults, the only potential improvements are in her E1S1, and giving Aglaea tank stats so that Garment Maker doesn't die to a light breeze. Cyrene has the unique problem of getting her ult way too slow without a Mono Remembrance team or the Perpetual Engine, especially since this is a 2-cycle game mode, so funny enough, in either case, you really don't care that her build lacks Vonwacq or Eagle with regards to acquiring her initial ult. Afterwards, though, Eagle is really good for spamming more actions for more ults, but Deliver and Amphoreus is a definite second best relic choice. Not a bad trial set at all. And, well, Saber's fixed energy and immediate turn when she has her ult ready, similar to the Herta, gives her less of a reliance on the demonic set too. The only real downside is that 4-piece Wave Strider's effect is useless as an off-field unit, to be honest, which is where she usually prefers to go pre-E6. Now, here's where things start to get a bit awkward. Firefly, at least before getting 3 stars, moves just a tad too slow for what this game mode demands, and with her ult now being an actual attack, plus being able to regen it faster thanks to additional fixed energy on her basic and skill, something that would really be nice for a potential buff down the line, she actually has real Eagle potential. Still, 25% defense ignore on Super Break is really nice, and easily her second best option, especially seeing how much speed she gives herself from combustion that waters down Eagle's effect just a little bit. They still seem to think that Lingsha is a break DPS given her choice of a break effect rope over energy regen and an S1 what is real, but she has an HP orb for some reason to make Fuyuan's harder to proc from losing percent max HP, which ends up diminishing her healing? Yeah, very bizarre. Also, S1 of a free light cone. Why? At least her ult advances 3 Fuyuans to 0 AV, so her being kinda slow isn't much of an issue. Oh look, they made the Hysilens Cyrene interaction a real thing by making all attacks proc Hysilens and 1 random DOT. It's for this reason that Princener's Defense Shred is actually quite nice, though an ERR rope and or Eagle to spam more turns and more dot detonations is still ideal. Also, the DOT trigger condition is dependent on Hysilens hitting the enemy first, so all the more reason to give her as much speed as possible rather than invest in her damage, which already gets externally buffed to high heaven. And, well, she has Glamoth without the full effect at 160 speed anyways. Awkward. Alright, pause. Why does Trial Evernight have 4-piece Goddess? What part of her kit procs healing? Does summoning Eevee count as healing? What is the logic here? Man, Hoyo is not subtle about trying to force a support agenda onto the best AoE DPS in the game. Other than that truly interesting kit choice that for sure is not based off of user build, she's fine stat-wise, and unlike Castorice, she has an actual free-to-play-ish 4-star light cone that's locked behind gacha and not the battle pass. Oh, and she can off-field, that's probably the most important part, excusing her questionable build, for me at least. Mydei is actually our first and only DPS to massively overcap on crit rate, as his full talent gives him 48%, which he easily hits in battle, and the advantage layout gives him another 18% for a total of 127.2% crit rate. Also, Event Lycon S1 strikes again. This is not the first time you'd see this, nor will it be the last. Still fine as a frontline soloer though, as enemies can get his Vendetta online much quicker thanks to immediately proccing it off-field, and having it accelerated like crazy when he's on-field. And finally, Mr. 1 million buffs but still mid himself, Mr. Jing Yuan. Crazy how the Shenzhou Bond's Lightning Lord runs laps around his own, even with the stack generation being doubled and Lightning Lord acting immediately, plus advancing Jing Yuan by 50% after attacking. Obviously, Eagle and Vonwacq with an ERR rope would go crazy for Lightning Lord spam, since buff Jing Yuan has built an advance that's almost on par with Rappa's S1, but yeah, bonded Lightning Lord is way too OP. That's the power of friendship versus the dozing general for you. And now you get to the truly bricked units. Oh boy. Trial Hyacine, I have a bone to pick with you. With her best in slot relic set and 0 substats and speed, Hyacine hits 168.8 speed in battle with her best relics. So the fact that Hyacine here not only has 171 speed here, but also 4-piece messenger for some gosh darn forsaken reason is a massive failure on Hoyo's part. Calling this a casual build would be an insult to casuals, as just by putting an S5 Herta Shop light cone on her, she hits 182 speed, aka high enough to actually proc her tree planer. or how fast she would be if Pissinger's piss-poor 12% speed boost uptime was actually permanent and not less than a turn instead. And getting excess speed past 200, converting to outgoing healing bonus like her kit intends, without speed amp equipments, just forget it. But more of a sin is the fact that she lacks Vonwacq, which for a unit having no healing whatsoever until her first ult is a death sentence in higher difficulty levels. Try surviving for 50 AV, aka half a cycle, without a sustain, and let me know how that works out in higher difficulties. I swear, Fat Frick is almost as dependent on the perpetual machine as Cyrene is, and that's just to do her job as a healer. For being the supposed strongest sustain in every other game mode, this kind of trial performance is disappointing, to say the least. Joining the ring of worse than expected frontline healers, though, is Jiaoqiu. Now, I don't actually know if he wears 4-piece Prisoner and 2-piece Pangalactic. He could be running Eagle and Vonwacq in actual battle for all I know, but assuming that the build target is his actual relics, well, it's not looking great for his turn 1 either. Unlike Cipher and like Hyacine, he doesn't offer anything real to the team until his turn 1 is online and he gets his ult off. And even with Prisoner's Defense Shred, his DOTs tickle the enemy. Also, as a side note, oh my gosh, does his 6 Ashen Rose proc cap per ult suck so much on an Acheron team unless you run it with like turbo speed boots. Even with Eagle and Vonwacq alone, this man gets hard outlapped by every enemy in this game mode. On one hand, Seele's rework is genuinely awesome, and playing her takes me back to the days of old Pure Fiction where she could ult spam with Eagle and Energy Regeneration Rope for infinite turns. On the other hand, Trial Seele likely has neither of those, making her ult loops way less consistent. You can still get lots of turns with Belobog Bond's advanced buff and a hyperspeed Pella, but you still get less turns overall, and thus less max HP executes as a result. Wow, a game mode where Argenti can spam Eagle to his heart's content against a minimum 3 enemy lineup thanks to the AoE attack bond. Too bad no one plays him anymore, and so his most popular set is still stuck on 4-piece Champion for some reason. Not even Scholar for max damage, dang. Whether he uses a hyper carry or a third of battery, Eagle and an ERR rope is just too good on him to not pass up, making his trial build feel absolutely lacking. Especially since as a battery, passkey is his best option, aka a super easy to attain 3-star light cone. It feels like the next trial build stole his Eagle set, and well, unfortunately Cipher is not abusing that with her 4-turn ult that works best as a one and done. To add insult to injury, she's way below the speed benchmark needed to double her true damage tally, letting her only collect 50% more instead without access to speed amplification. Not to mention that since the dev thought it was a good idea to invest into her crit, she is literal paper, especially with pearls. Look, if one of my friends who owns E6 Ciphers and just slaps double defense main stats and calls it a day, then surely Trial Cipher can follow suit just so that she doesn't die over petty change, right? Right? Anyways, our final Christos heir as well as our final S1 event Lycone holder is none other than Cerydra. You know the drill, no Eagle, no Vonwacq, no DDD. It's particularly egregious in her case though, as more turns leads to more double attacks for her DPS of choice, which with Lingsha leads to potential infinite looping, and with Dill or Archery means more SP since, well, every turn for Cerydra is an SP. At least she does decent off-field though, but similar to Hyacine, you'll have to wait a while for her first skill to proc before your DPS can start going crazy with the turn doubling if you're running her as an off-fielder. As for the rest of the limited break trio, Boothill not having the ability to spam ults with Eagle and Von when his ult got buffed to deal more toughness damage is just insult to injury. He also has a damage percent orb when his crit damage is basically non-existent in comparison to his break damage, and combined with a 4-star light cone, he becomes way less tankier than he should be. The same applies to Rappa, though she at least contributes a little bit more outside of her own turn by dealing bonus break damage. With a lack of a natural turn 1 ult though, it's very easy for a well-built break team to just end the fight before she gets her ult online. Ironically, it's because of their low speed, relatively speaking, and no off-turn action that both of these frontliners are better off serving as Galaxy Rangers on the backline and supporting Break Acheron instead. Heck, I'd go as far as to say that 3 Galaxy Ranger Acheron easily clears a 2-star Firefly, and mine is E2 for reference. And now for our last version 3 unit in Sunday. As a -1 DPS in a game mode where speed is whatever you want it to be, not having access to Vonwacq, Eagle, or DDD to catch up to your lightspeed DPS or outspeed the supersonic enemies is a bit sus. Sure, it's only a loss of 1 to 3 turns on average, but when every fight is 0 cycle duration's worth, every last turn becomes pretty darn valuable. Still though, you can technically make E0 S0 Sunday with Lushaka and Sacerdoce works, which is generous compared to the very tip top of this list. There was no doubt Feixiao was going to make this list when I peeped the stats. Every on-field DPS thus far has had around 70% crit rate at base, even more for those that had built-in crit rate buffs. Feixiao has 33.9%. Remember in the beginning how I said that 18% extra crit rate isn't enough to save everyone on this list? Yeah, I was specifically referring to her. I hope you like playing 50-50s on your crits as well as your gachas. Oh, and unrelated to her trial kit, but related to her RNG, but her bonus follow-up is a 20% gamble per follow-up with no ability to stack. Like, why is the chance to land 3 times lower than Yanqing's follow-up, which is totally known for being consistent? Not. It only goes up by 5% per star level too, so a 4-star Fei, if you somehow get your hands on one, still only lands that extra follow-up 35% of the time. Not to mention that Valorous Fei is utter dog water compared to Eagle Fei, and this only gets compounded in an endgame where she gets rewarded for ulting with more power and more ults. And well, I think that based on the poll I sent over a week ago, most people agree that Trial Fei is pretty bad and deserving of this top tier spot. Speaking of the next most voted option though, Kafka also lacks the abusability of Eagle with her rapid ults, but to add insult to injury, she is missing both the freeze tutorial and an energy regeneration robe. She is a freaking snail compared to what she could have been, and so underwhelming in practice that she's basically indistinguishable from pre-buff Kafka by comparison. Heck, just like her DOT partner in crime, Hysilens, she's not even fast enough to fully proc her Glamox set. I guess you can kinda circumvent this with a partner Hyperspeed Silverwolf to let her skill more often with a Stellaron Hunter spawn, but even then, being dependent on a 4 cost to save your run is not great. And it's still just worse than slapping Eagle in tutorial on any old E0 S0 Kafka. And finally, for our last entry on this list, a relatively under-the-radar pick that hadn't really occurred to me until I saw this comment and went to check the build. Holy moly, what did they do to you, Aventurine? So, remember how I also said in the beginning that 36% defense might not be enough to save certain units? Yeah, there's only one defense scaler in the list, and he's at the absolute tippy top. For some reason, Hoyo decided to make him a sub-DPS, and in the process made his trial build completely unusable as a sustain, which, well, that's kinda why you're bringing Aventurine in the first place. Defense percent rope, so he doesn't replenish his ults as often. Imaginary orb, crit rate body, and speed boots, so his shields are paper thin. And guess what? If event shields are broken, that's one less target per missing shield he can generate blind bet off of, so his DPS actually gets gutted here too. Trial Event tries to be both a sustain and a sub DPS, and somehow achieves neither in the process. And well, being forced on field means that he's either taking up a useful spot on field, or contributing nothing but a couple extra bond names off field. Bro is genuinely unplayable without at least one other shielder, and with barely any other accessible ways to make his shield stronger directly, due to defense being such an unbuffable stat, he's pretty much stuck like that all game. It really is a shame that they didn't even bother to give him the new set that increases your shield strength by 25%. Like, do they really think that Aventurine is still invincible? Dan Heng PT makes him look like a 1-cost 3-star unit by comparison, and doesn't even take up a frontline slot to boot. With that, here's the full tier list as a recap on where I think everyone is ranked. If you disagree, please feel free to let me know in the comments how wrong I am, or if you agree, let me know how badly they fumbled with the trial builds mentioned here below. It's been pretty entertaining scanning through everyone's Currency Wars kits, so I feel like I could chat about this for a while, maybe even make another video if there's enough demand for it. And before I go, shout out to Trial Anaxa for being the only trial character with Eagle and Vonwacq, as an off-field DPS who does not have an ult. Truly a joke that only the Elation could dream up. Thanks for watching.